Welcome to Table Talk 7.5. We're following up on some of the topics from last week, as well as discussing some common habits of tabletop gaming. Give us feedback on Reddit, Instagram, YouTube, or send us an email at lateafternoongaming@gmail.com if there's something you want us to talk about. And welcome back.
Hello, everyone.
I got a few things on the Ombudsman report. Last night, when we were done recording another downtime, we started, as we often do, kind of getting a pre-table talk in, where we were talking about the things we wanted to talk about during table talk, and then, halfway started having those conversations. But the first thing that we started talking about was revisiting the sponsorship conversation again, because Duncan had some extra ideas, or some follow-on thoughts about sort of the rules, what we want that to look like, or what we would want that to look like in the unlikely event that someone ever actually tries to sponsor us. Go ahead, Duncan.
I thought you were going to go somewhere with that before you kicked it to him. Okay, so you had asked a couple of interesting questions that were something along the lines of, what are your personal rules for it, or what do you think makes it work on other shows and things like that. And I think at the end of the table talk, I circled back around to it and said, I just don't want it to be annoying.
Right, yeah, that was the capper thought you had.
Yeah, and I think now what I'm saying is, it's two things. I stand by that. I don't want it to be annoying, and I don't want it to be dishonest, which is maybe a little broader than flat out saying I don't want to lie. And what I mean is, the annoying thing is obvious. Ads themselves can be annoying. The placement of those ads can be annoying. They can interrupt a show, or, ideally they're like in the beginning and people can skip them if they find them really annoying. But I mean, even better, they're actually funny. Like the way you read them is funny, or the way they're incorporated. People maybe don't look forward to them, but they're worth hearing. Even better than that, they're like something you actually want to hear about. It's a description of a product that you may actually want to buy. The I don't want to be dishonest bit is, I'm okay at advertising for a product that I don't personally use, as long as I don't have to pretend to be using it. Like, I totally would do the Raid Shadow Legends thing. But I definitely don't want to do anything that, where I need to suggest that I'm using it when I don't. And I'm also totally okay with advertising for something that maybe a lot of other people wouldn't be. Like, I would advertise for a cigarette company. I don't care. I don't think we don't have that many listeners, period. But if we did, I don't imagine they'd be children. And so, like, I don't see any sort of moral problem there. I don't think it's a mystery to anyone that cigarettes are unhealthy. So that's my stance. Not annoying, not dishonest.
Yeah, I don't think I've really changed at all over the past week on my stance. Like, I still wouldn't want to. I'm anti-smoking. I wish people didn't do it, and I wouldn't want to represent Philip Morris in any way, because I don't know. I don't want people to use their products, so I wouldn't want to advertise it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a spectrum there. I mean, I'm anti-mayonnaise. I think it's disgusting, but you know what I mean. I don't think there's anything morally wrong with eating it. Same with cigarettes. To me, I mean, one is obviously worse for your health than the other, but I don't know. Maybe that's the sort of libertarian in me. But yeah, I mean, if they want to pay for it, and I don't get. I guess I don't understand in general the way that governments and individuals have handled smoking advertising. If this were 30, 40 years ago, and well, I guess it would have been longer ago, but if this was decades ago, when there were questions about whether or not smoking harmed you, and the smoking companies were actively lobbying to keep it under wraps that they were killing people. That I totally get. But now, like, it's so out in the open. Would you advertise for an unhealthy food?
I think the significant distinction I would make there is that cigarettes have a chemical additive in them that make them addictive. Like, if you get somebody started on cigarettes, that is something that is very actively impacting their long-term health, potentially giving them, like, a good chance of cancer, and they might actually get hooked on it because of the nicotine.
Okay, fair point. But again,
so does alcohol.
Well known.
Yeah, I also wouldn't advertise alcohol.
I wouldn't want to advertise alcohol. I'm anti-drinking.
Okay, so I think we're different in this regard, where anything that you don't like, you don't want to advertise for.
That's correct. Yeah, I wouldn't want. Well, and again, this is a place where, because I'm not expecting to like have to make a living off of this podcast. Yeah. It would be nice if it paid for itself, because right now I'm just losing money to it. But like, I have the luxury of being able to, pick some principles and stick to them. So I can afford to be selective. So that's why I'm allowed to have these kinds of criteria.
Well, and now that sort of clarifier is out there, at this point in time, I agree with you. If it's today, if cigarette company X reached out to me and said, we'd like to sponsor you, and it wasn't like some number that blew my mind, the answer would be like, no thanks, I don't need it. If this was if we were trying to make a living off of this and sponsorships were something we genuinely had to grapple with, different story.
Yeah, no, I imagine my criteria would shift if we became reliant on the podcast for some significant portion of our income, then, I wouldn't be able to be as selective, presumably.
Because the stance of sort of, I only advertise for things that I like, I suspect is limiting to the point that realistically almost no one can do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely super limiting. I don't know that almost no one can do it. There are plenty of things that I like. Even things that I have... Not arguing against that, but, the Venn diagram of things you like and things that are going to come to you with a sponsorship deal. I suspect the overlap is small. Perhaps. Once someone starts sending me sponsorship offers, maybe I'll be able to graph it out for everybody. Yeah. Speaking of, in the late afternoon gaming email, which I do check.
Are you allowed to send emails to it? Or have you set that up so that people can't send emails to it?
Boy, I wish. Yes, you can send emails to lateafternoongaming@gmail.com. But most of the spam I get in like my personal email addresses are like, it's spam from things that I have once used the email address to sign up for. It's like I'd used it as a Target login one day, and now I never stop getting Target emails or whatever. Or even, try as I might to unsubscribe from the Amazon mailing list or something, I still get Amazon emails. So that's like the kind of spam I normally get. The spam I get in the late afternoon gaming email is like the more traditional kind of spam. It's a lot of
like Nigerian Prince spam.
Yeah, it's exactly that kind of stuff. I keep getting emails from Warren Buffett about how he wants to, he likes the way I invest or something like that, and he wants to give me a bunch of money to do that.
He's a big deal. You should email him back.
I know, right? It's mostly those kinds of emails, and I'd never actually gotten those before until the late afternoon gaming email address, and that is in the spam folder. It's almost exclusively that. Now, I will say there was one email that wound up in spam that probably shouldn't have, and it was actually something that Caboose had emailed me for some reason. And I missed it for like 2 months because it was in the spam folder. I just hadn't checked the spam folder. Which makes me curious, in the event that someone ever did try to sponsor us, what are the odds that Google's filter would just put it in the spam folder and I would never see it?
Google's like, nah, they would never actually reach out. That's not the thing.
Right, yeah, I don't know. And I'd never thought about it until I was like really exploring what was in the spam folder, and eventually found Caboose's email. I was like, this might actually be a problem, but whatever. Maybe it'll become more obvious if if someone real actually does send us an email, but it hasn't happened yet. But speaking of sponsorship and Caboose, we were talking with him last night, and he mentioned that he was interested in doing or at least willing to do a Spalted Dolphin giveaway via our podcast.
Oh my.
Yes, and he's offered up a couple of items, but we have to decide how to do the giving away, how to pick who to give it away to. Fortunately, we have more items than we do listeners.
Right, yeah. So it shouldn't be too competitive.
Right. So specifically, we're looking at one dice bag and set of poly dice. So that combination, two of those. A dice bag and a matching pencil roll. So this is a cloth. It's like a cloth. I don't know what you call it. A tool roll, a tool bundle, right? Where it's a rectangular cloth that lays flat that has slots for tools. In this case, it's pencils, and then it rolls up and you tie it. And that comes with some goodies, he says, and unusual.
I imagine those are pencils.
It's not clear. And 14 dice. So these are the Dungeon Crawl Classic style Zoki dice. And the final one is a dice tray and a dice bag and a 14 die set.
Yeah, and so we were kind of discussing last night, what would the methodology be for determining who gets these things? And it brought up, or it made me think of something that I've been thinking about for a while, which if you ever see any YouTube videos, for example, of people talking about the things you're supposed to do on YouTube according to YouTube in order to increase engagement. One of the things they always talking about is you're supposed to have a call to action. So, watch a YouTube video from someone who has more than 500,000 subscribers. And a lot of times, they'll obviously say that they want you to like and subscribe and hit the bell and whatever else. But they'll also, at some point in the video, in a way that might seem pretty organic, request that you leave a comment about something. If it's, I'm just going to make something up. If it's top 10 music videos for, 2023, at one point, they'll either at the end of the video say did you think there were any better ones? Leave it in the comments below. Or there will be something that happens did this video go too far? What do you think? Leave it in the comments. There will be something like that where they're trying to pick a specific thing that, people will talk about in the comments to drive conversation and ensure that some people do in fact comment.
Right.
And that's called a call to action in YouTube lingo.
And I've been thinking about what I want ours to be. So listeners, if you meet us in our nation's capital on January 6th next year.
Perfect.
Awesome.
I will give you one of these.
Yeah. We're probably not going to get it.
Yeah, come ready to rumble.
We're not going to get a million magas, but we'll get mini magas. So it'll be the mini.
I didn't say what it was about.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to get them all riled up when we get there.
Yeah, about something or other.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure there's something to get mad about.
I haven't decided it yet. It'll be something topical at that time.
It'll be a vocal fry. We're gonna be marching against vocal fry.
Yeah, we're gonna put an end to it. We'll have bottles of water.
Yeah. Just drink this. Stop lowering your voice.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I haven't given it a lot of thought yet. He just told us this last night.
Yeah.
And
if he expects us to already have something out for it, then he needs to check his expectations.
No, it was hopeful that he offered the fruits of his labor.
Yeah.
It was not helpful that he didn't tell us exactly how to use it.
Oh, right, exactly. Yeah, I need a little more guidance.
So I told him to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
You're just creating more problems.
No more downtimes for him. No, I'm kidding. Actually, I'm going to throw this out there. Caboose is a wonderful person to have at your table for Dungeons & Dragons. He's very funny and works well with railroading DMs like myself. Which makes me excited to do more downtimes, which listeners will be out next week. One of them.
Yes, we keep talking about things in the past tense that you haven't heard.
Yeah, well, luckily at the beginning of Downtime 1, I mentioned that by the time that people are listening to it, it's well in the past.
Someone had mentioned this to me. I think it was Roland, like a year ago, when in our last campaign, we would go through these big gaps where we didn't put anything out. And Roland had asked, why didn't you release an episode? And I'd say, because I didn't record one. And he pointed out that many successful podcasts, and he emphasized successful,
I wonder why.
Get like maybe as much as a season's worth of recording done before they actually start putting things out so they can stay regular. And I didn't have an answer for that. So anyway, recently, not spearheaded by me, spearheaded by Shepard, we know that we have kind of a gap coming up based on work and vacation type conflicts. So we have been dutifully recording additional content that we can lay down during those dead weeks.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that you bring up the doing recordings ahead of time. So one piece of advice that I had always heard that's sort of related to that was when you're doing something in media production, so for example, doing a podcast, you want to record a bunch of them ahead of time, not necessarily as something to build a bank, but just to make sure that what you're doing sounds good, like you have a good technique, you have a good method, people have good equipment, whatever the case may be. And that was something that I've been focused on, and we've talked about it before. In some form, the podcast thing has existed now for several years. Even before Curse of Strahd, we've been doing something for about 2 years before that. And I had developed some techniques. So by the time we started doing
I misunderstood. I thought you meant podcasts had existed for several years.
No. Our
okay.
us recording stuff,
yes,
and preserving it and then presenting it. My mistake. I might have been unclear. So that was something that I had been focused on. And again, obviously, you go back and listen to session 1 of Curse of Strahd, and it sounds terrible. But it wasn't the worst thing ever. It was much worse in the past. So we've still grown since then. But we were at a place where it was publishable, even if suboptimal, and we've gotten better since then.
So,
but
finish your point, and then I have another one.
No, I was just saying, to your point, I do think it would have been wise if we had pre-recorded some downtime stuff that was time agnostic. You could publish it whenever, because right now we're sort of treading water in the sea of making sure that you put something out every week, and we're not getting ahead at the moment, and so not that I think we have to kill ourselves to make sure we put something out every week, but yeah, it would have been nice to do that. Oh. Yeah, it would have been nice to think about that ahead of time and maybe have some stuff ready.
Yeah, well, two responses. First is that's why that bit where I'm going to come home and just tell you about my day for several hours, and we'll put one of those out daily. That's why that's going to help us. But the other one is you need to put a Post-it note up on your monitor that says something like, most people listen to this in the car. Just to remind yourself that although I love that our audio is so good. It's nice listening to, especially episodes from within the last year. Everybody sounds great. But at the same time, the very first episode we put out is perfectly listenable because, when I listened to it, I was mowing the lawn.
Sure.
Most people do not sit down in their anechoic chamber with a pair of expensive open-backed headphones to listen to the podcast.
Yeah, well, and that's a piece of feedback I had gotten a long time ago, back in around 2020. A friend of mine uses FL Studio to make music, and he was talking about how when he's making music, he usually has some pretty nice headphones on, but then before he is done editing, he listens to it with some Skull Candy $15 earbuds.
Right.
Because the sound balance is way different, and if you're only listening to it with your Sennheisers on, you might miss something.
Sure. Or you might think something's coming through that isn't.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something that I have noticed has been happening to me, where I've been agonizing over some like levels of stuff when I'm listening, because I have Sennheisers. As I'm editing, I'm like, like that's not quite right. Like the music's too loud, or it's not loud enough, or Jack is on average 1 decibel louder than everyone else, or whatever. And it never gets to the point where I'm totally satisfied with it when I'm listening through my Sennheisers. And then I end up publishing it anyway, because there's only so much I can do. Right. And then I listen to it in the car or on my AirPods or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, this sounds totally fine. Like, this sounds, all of the problems I had listening to it on Sennheiser, I can't hear any of them now, and it sounds perfect. So it's hard to know where that line is sometimes, and I want to make sure we still have a quality product, but I do recognize that my listening environment as I'm editing is necessarily very different than everyone else's in some ways, and naturally different in others. You said you had 2 points. I think that was the first.
No, I made 2.
Oh, okay.
One is about my bit about coming home and talking about my day. Right. I do have
that will require no editing at all, which is really nice.
I do have a calling back to something that you said a while back. You talked about how we made the mistake of talking about something before table talk and degrading the discussion as a result.
Which we do like every week.
We're much better about it now than we were, when we started. And the way we do this, listeners, is we have a thread on our Discord server that people post. It's called Table Talk Topics, and once something posts there, the rule is don't talk about it, so you don't ruin the spontaneity of the conversation.
Problem is, a lot of them are really good conversation starters.
Yeah, it is good conversation candy. But this came up for me this week, so I started a book club at work. Jack and Shepard, you will recognize this is similar to a book club that we used to do on the server. This is a controversial book club where we pick books that are either themselves contentious or they're on contentious topics, and then after work we go grab a beer someplace and we go through the main points of the book or the structure of the book and talk about it. And this is something that really invites a lot of that pre-discussion, which I'm desperate to prevent from happening.
Right.
I was getting a ride from one of the participants in the book club on the way to the venue, and they wanted to talk about it. And I was like, no, we can't do this.
Right,
now,
that's what the book club is for,
right,
guy.
Stop it. But anyway, it's a funny thing, and I don't know if I brought this up before, but I think it was Caboose was telling me he had some friends who similarly wanted to start their own podcast, and I don't remember what it was about specifically. Maybe it was just a two guys talking thing. But they were running into this issue where they were saying, man, I feel like we have really good and interesting conversations, but then when we sit down to record, we've got nothing. Right. And it's like, well, right, the problem is you're sitting around having all these good conversations. So you need to,
right.
you gotta stop
you're doing
that
with microphones, and that's not any good. That's worthless.
Yeah, and so we're not willing to not see each other except for the podcast. This is a group of people here. The participants in this podcast all hang out over the course of the week. We don't all live in the same area, but some of us do, and otherwise we'll play video games together and stuff like that. But our remedy has been to create the Table Talk Topics thread and try to respect that, and it's worked reasonably well.
Yeah, and a lot of times during any of those in-the-week conversations, if something comes up where there are enough of us there that, if it's two of us that are going to be here for the podcast, and then it strays into something that would be a very good
we'll off-ramp it. We'll
topic.
Say, we'll put a cap on that, and...
Yeah, let's save it for the podcast.
Yes.
But let me continue with my couple other points here.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is something that Jack has probably been, excited about and annoyed that we haven't gotten to yet. So Jack talked about the potato diet last week.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been a week. So, we were very curious to find out, hey, how much weight has Jack lost? So, Jack, you started at about, what, 530 pounds or so? What
I think
are you
that's
at now?
about right. Yeah.
But he's 18 feet tall, so
Right, yeah, that's normal. That's fine.
Joe Rogan lookalike.
yeah.
No, the
Could you tease us a little by talking about your experience and then give us the final stats?
Oh,
Oh,
perfect.
God,
Yeah.
no. Okay.
Make this
So
like a
I
recipe
will
website.
provide some relevant context because one of the things that I don't know how much we discussed this last week, but there's a lot of degrees of freedom with this diet where some people are like, I literally ate potatoes and nothing else. And then some people are like, oh, I used,
I didn't even drink water.
Like I used oil to cook the potatoes, but other than that, I didn't do anything. Or, some people did some weird shit like not even using salt and pepper, which is terrible, and I immediately dismissed that like out of hand. But really, the do you or do you not use oil was one of the biggest separating points for people. And then there were some people who were like, I'll have one cheat day a week. And then some people were saying, no, I'm not going to have any cheat days. I'm just going, full potato. I'm going potato mode. The way my week was structured, I kind of had an outing planned already. So I ended up having a cheat day because I was going out to eat with somebody, and weirdly enough, they didn't have an all potato option.
Yeah, excuse me, sir. Could I just
Garbage.
get a
Hopefully
potato?
more restaurants will become accommodating.
Yeah.
I know, right?
I'm just going to eat that potato like an apple. Just bring it out raw.
Yeah. So, but for the most part, I've been eating potato wedges, baked potatoes, with either just salt and pepper or maybe a little bit of olive oil or something. And it's kind of hard to tell just because your weight fluctuates a good amount just throughout the day. So the amount of weight you lose in 1 week is a little hard to determine. But eyeballing it, I would say 4 or 5 pounds.
Nice.
And we were talking about it last night, but I think one of the biggest contributing factors is the calorie density of a potato, which is way lower than I previously appreciated. Because they're very filling. Like you eat a potato and it feels like you ate something. It feels like you just did something, right?
But it turns out you did.
Yeah, it turns out you didn't. The thing that we were talking about last night, the example I gave was a 5-pound bag of russet potatoes.
I thought we
If you
said
went
10
home-
pound.
No,
I
5
thought
pounds.
it was a 50-pound.
50 pounds. No, 5-pound bag is a pretty standard thing that you can just pick up at a grocery store. And if you went home and ate a 5-pound bag of potatoes, you would, unless I'm doing my math wrong, and I don't think I am, you would not actually meet the recommended calorie intake for an adult male in the United States. You would be somewhere between 1,600 and 1,700 calories. But you will have consumed 5 pounds of food. So one of the
Which
ways...
I think means you'll have 5 pounds of poop the following day.
Well, so we'll get to that.
Good.
One of the ways that I think the weight loss on this diet works is just the, preparation. I very quickly found that I do not have the patience to prepare 30 potatoes per day. And I didn't feel like I needed to, because once you eat 6 or 7 potatoes, you feel like you don't want to eat anything because you're so full. But the potatoes have almost no calorie content to them, so you end up with this pretty significant calorie deficit every day. But they have all the vitamins and minerals you need. Basically, you can take a pretty mild supplement and it'll cover any bases that it's missing, but there's not many that potatoes are missing, and you're good to go. So you just follow the diet, and you've got this huge calorie deficit, and that helps drive weight loss. But to the point of the massive amount of stuff that is in your intestines at any given time, my throughput has increased massively. I have had some of the most epic shits in the last week. Which was
In terms of frequency or volume or both?
Volume at the beginning, and then I sort of started pulling back. I now have stabilized at a significantly lower number of potatoes because, again, they're just very filling. But near the beginning, I was like, I'm going to try to get at least close to the normal recommended calorie intake and see what that does. And man, let me tell you.
You're trying to eat 5 pounds of potatoes.
Yeah. Well, and so, day 2 of the diet, I was heavier than I was when I started, just because all the stuff that was in my gut.
Sure.
All the poo-poo in your tum-tum.
Yeah, pretty much. But I was looking at, I think it was on Slime Mold, Time Mold, which is the blog that introduced me to this concept to begin with. One of the comments on there that they actually brought up in the later article where they were talking about the results, because they kind of ran an informal experiment about it. One of the guys that they were discussing, who had been part of their experiment and had provided input, was like, yeah, man, on the potato diet, I had like the best shits. They were like the closest to a no wiper I've ever had. And went on to recommend, like, if anybody really likes anal sex, do the potato diet. And the bloggers were like, well, that's not really the input we were looking for, but I guess that's good input for somebody out there.
Sure, hey, that's valuable information.
But in terms of how it's actually worked out, one of the, like, I've seen a lot of varying comments and input on how successful different diets can be for people. Like, I've heard some people say, like, this diet is amazing, and then you look at a lot of, like, aggregate research, and it looks like most diets are actually pretty ineffective, with the main reason being that people don't stay on them, as far as I can tell.
Well, I don't know that that's evidence that the diet isn't effective.
Well, I mean, I think it is.
I think that's like the most. If a diet, if you can't stay on a diet, it doesn't matter how much weight it makes you lose if you stay on it.
Well, but it also sounds to me like running doesn't help you lose weight because I don't run enough.
No, but don't think of running. Think of running as, or think of a workout routine. Like, a workout routine isn't effective for you. We're not talking. He's not saying the diet for everyone isn't effective. We're talking about on the level of an individual. Part of something being effective is you being able to implement it consistently.
If 1,000 people attempt a diet,
I thought you had said a diet is ineffective because people don't follow.
The missing part of that sentence was for you.
Yeah, if 1,000 people attempted a diet and collectively lost on average 0 pounds, then I wouldn't care if one person lost, 50. I would say that diet will probably not be effective for me. So one of my main things that I was curious about was one of the big selling points that gets talked about for the potato diet is that it's easy, and that people who are on it don't feel like they're having to put a lot of effort in psychologically. Like, they're not struggling to maintain the diet. They don't have to try. It just sort of happens. And I was extremely skeptical about that. But
I can see that because I can, much to your point, or maybe this isn't quite the point you're trying to make, but I don't consider potatoes to be diet foods. Like, everyone likes potatoes. Everyone likes eating potatoes. So, while you are not eating other things, obviously, on the potato diet, I can understand why people would feel like they're not giving as much up like you often do for a diet.
But my concern was, I also like potatoes, but going in, I wasn't sure how happy I would be eating only potatoes. Like, that, would I get tired of it? Would it get old? Would I start having cravings for other things? And weirdly, no. I was, it's only been a week, obviously, but I have not gotten tired of potatoes.
No, what's the word on sweet potatoes? We talked about,
those are good.
Sweet potatoes are great.
Okay, but these are pretty plain potatoes, right? You're not adding anything else into it.
I will occasionally add some, like, olive oil, and I always use, like, salt and pepper, various seasonings.
What about, like, margarine?
I've not used margarine.
Okay. All right, so these really are pretty plain.
They're extremely plain, and it hasn't been a problem, which was shocking to me.
How do you make the baked potatoes? Is it really you just put it on a baking sheet in the oven and you...
Yeah, I got the toaster oven, and I can just make... Yeah, just
All
like...
right.
And it's... So, I've also saved a lot of money, just over the course of a week. Like...
Yeah.
Well, I guess I shouldn't say I've saved a lot of money. I can extrapolate and see that if I were to continue this diet, I would, over time, save a lot of money, because potatoes, not that expensive.
Oh, yeah.
So then what's the transition once you've hit that? You know, 'cause it's not like you're going to eat only potatoes for the rest of your life.
No, but I'm curious to see if I decide to stick with this, because I'm coming up on a couple of weeks where it's not really going to be an option anyway. But if I stick with it and get to a weight that I'm happy with, I wonder if I might transition to like a half-tato diet, you know? I have no idea.
So you're thinking that you might be on some version of a percentage of potato diet forever.
I may, and this is very speculative, but it may be that if I get to where I want to go, I might just set like a threshold and be like, okay, if I go above X pounds, I have to spend a week on the potato diet. Or
You
know,
get to spend a week on the potato.
yeah, I'm obligated to stay on it until I get down to some lower set point, and either that becomes an effective way to control it, or maybe the threat of going a week on only potatoes is enough to make me stay under that weight anyway. Although it's not really much of a threat, because like I said, it hasn't actually been that hard.
So if the mechanism
it does seem
here
effective.
is that potatoes have low calorie density, and so you can basically eat as much as you want, and you're still not going to hit the you're still going to be in a caloric deficit. Are there other foods that could be thrown in here?
Right, like celery
or
something.
Like cucumbers,
or a lot
stuff
of
like that.
green vegetables that, as long as you don't add a bunch of oil and butter and fatty things, they're still going to be in that same thing.
I don't know. I do plan to experiment as I continue. But at the moment, I'm doing as close to a pure potato diet as I was willing to try for 1 week, and may go further in that direction in the future. But the summary is, it actually, shockingly, appears to work, at least for me.
Okay.
That's pretty sweet.
Wow.
Which is
Last
hilarious.
week I said I would join you, and this week I'm also saying that I'll join you.
Excellent.
There you
Last week I said I was trying it because I thought it sounded funny, and I gave it I think I said 15% chance of working, so I guess I have to kind of eat my words there.
No, well,
Don't
you
eat
can't
those.
because you're not
You can only eat
potatoes.
potatoes.
Yeah, you see that? I gave you the setup, and you guys followed through.
Wow.
Well done.
Moving on to the next thing in the Ombudsman report. It's the last thing as well. So I thought that the 10 bars thing from last session was very funny. Where you looked at your character sheet, realized that you had very high scores in certain things, and then started, your character became a different person as a result of that, which I thought was really funny. And we talked a little bit about it before on Table Talk, but I think it's interesting as a character generation method to use character traits, like the stats of your character, to determine who your character is, as opposed to doing it the way I think more people probably do it now, where you have an idea of who your character is as a person, and then you use that to figure out what their stats would be, or what their class would be, or something like that in another system. I'm curious what you guys think about that. What do you like to do when you're making a character? What have you done, and what have you found as effective?
Go ahead, Jay.
Go ahead. Oh, fine. I'll go ahead then.
Go ahead. Jesse, would you go ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump in you guys.
I think that the usage of stats to drive characterization, rather than the other way around, is a good way to have a character that is different from characters you may have had before. And you actually see that a lot if you're playing Dungeon Crawl Classics, where it's almost entirely randomized, and that forces you to sort of cozy up to these characters that you never would have chosen to create, but you're stuck with them and they're who you have. In this case, it kind of happened by accident, because I made the sheet and was like, I don't remember if I just didn't know at the time or didn't realize that you were going to be a detective, and I was like, one of us should have a firearm skill or something. But I did it, forgot about it, started coming up with this character, and then, just last session kind of remembered, oh yeah, I made him this, like, weird badass in one field, and I should start playing that up. But I like the general idea of having some, not being able to just decide unilaterally at the beginning what the character is going to be, having some level of randomization to force you to think in a way that you might not normally. I like that personally.
Yeah, I didn't ever go in that direction until I started playing DCC and was sort of forced to be like, ooh, this is a really low intelligence. Okay, how am I going to build that character out? Because in a lot of characters that I played previously, I would, build this really extensive sort of backstory and really figure out everything about them and and then use that to figure out the right skills that apply to that character and that person. That's fun, but it's also really time intensive and energy brain intensive. And I definitely, probably have a type of character that I would want to play or I would feel comfortable playing. And so, putting the stats in something I wouldn't expect and then having to figure it out the other way stretches my sort of creative muscles and makes me get outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah, my instinct is to meticulously create a character, and my first exposure to doing it a different way was several years after I started playing D&D. I think it was Don was running a Delta Green game, and I was going to be playing with them for one arc or something, my work schedule allowed it, and he asked me to come in and play an NPC that had sort of grown to the point that he thought it should be a player character, but it was this already written NPC that had characteristics and stats and motivations and things like that. And so it was a very different character from one that I would have written for myself, but it was a really fun experience. I thought it was cool, and realized that I did not need to have these very specific characters that I had put together to have a good time. When I started running my Monday night game for some of my coworkers, there were people who were playing there who either had never played any TTRPG before or were so out of practice that it was effectively new to them. And what I found was with D&D 5th edition, they had so many options and were so hung up on those options that it made character creation and getting started somewhat difficult, and there was a lot of second guessing. And what I mean by that is there was a player who I think they had never played before, and one of their first questions for me was, can I multi-class? And I said no. And I explained why. I just thought it was too much, too complicated, too early, that kind of thing. But she seemed somewhat put out by that. And if you read through the chapter, or all of the material in the player's handbook on races and classes, now with all the supplementary stuff out there as well, that's a lot. And if you're new, you do not know what a lot of it means. And so I do think it's sort of a Netflix-style paradox of choice thing, where it's a lot of good ideas, it's a lot of good content, and in theory, that should mean that it's just an unmitigated good that you can pick from this huge range of options. But in practice, it can be kind of overwhelming and can detract from the fun. The simplicity of Dungeon Crawl Classics, where not only are the class descriptions short, succinct, they all do cool things and they're different, but you understand what those differences are pretty much right away because they're not that complicated. And to a degree, it's decided for you. I so far I have not played with someone who hasn't found that to be a big improvement. So that's where I am.
And I've actually found I've had 3 people that were not interested in playing any kind of tabletop RPGs because it was like D&D was like too overwhelming, too complicated. And when we offered up DCC and they jumped in, you could figure it out right away. They had a ton of fun, and it was just way more accessible and allowed them to be able to get in and not feel that overwhelming pressure of like, what if I messed up? What if I didn't pick the right thing? And just go and play and have fun, which is the whole point.
I will say I think there's different. Maybe we're already saying this, but if you're a new player versus an experienced player, maybe those things have different values, and your mileage on any of those particular things varies.
True, but I think that depends on the type of player. I mean, frankly, I think DCC I think D&D, that sort of setup where you have all of this content to sift through when you're doing character creation, I think that is broadly more appealing to prepper power gamer types, which are categories I would put you into. So this is the sort of player who wants to optimize and is interested in spending time away from the table doing research on how they want to do that. That is not the case for a lot of people. So I have a lot of...
Well, real quick, I think what you just described are old school players. Like that is what you're expected to do, for these games forever up until very recently, I think.
I don't know that I agree with that. I think
there's always been a category of min-maxers.
Right.
Well, I don't think that preparing or reading through the book to look at what appeals to you most automatically puts you in the category of min-maxers.
I'm not saying
you overestimate the amount of effort that most people put in.
I agree with that, and I also think that I'm not saying I like DCC because none of my players can read, but there are people who are willing to do some level of preparation because it's what they need to do to get to the table. And then there are some people who specifically enjoy spending maybe hours of their time out of game doing the research to put together the character. And like that in and of itself, even if that character never makes it to the table, is fun. Like, I know that you have, or at one point had, many, many characters that you had taken the time to craft, put together, that may never see the light of day. Which you only would have done if you enjoy that in and of itself.
Right. Yes, this is true.
And that is a player type. That there are people who like to do that stuff out of game, but it's not most players. And I have also gone through phases where I do the same thing. But I guess what I'm getting at is, since that isn't most players, systems that sort of hinge on that happening fail, or at least don't operate as intended. But also, what I found was, and this is maybe what got me out of that habit, was when I went and I played in this game where a character was made for me, and it turned out that I had just as much fun as I normally do, I realized that those are two different things. You can put any character sheet in front of me, and whether it's something that I spent a lot of time making or was totally randomized, it doesn't really matter to me in the moment in terms of how much fun I'm going to have at the table. And so I essentially separated those into two different, those no longer have really anything to do with each other for me. But
sure.
Especially now that I'm running and playing in games with busy adults, even the ones who I think might want to do what you just described, often, either don't have time to or don't manage their time well enough to make that happen. And so a system that...
Sure. Or don't prioritize.
Right. And I'm happy to see people show up on time. Like that's the point that I've gotten to with my Monday night game. Is I had to do a significant amount of like threatening and then pruning to finally get us to the point where now I have a good group of people that is, they're punctual and we meet regularly and they show up, and I'm from like an out of game standpoint. What I'm doing now is setting up a Discord server so they can do things like buying items when they come back into town. We handle out of game, and they can do that virtually. I'll post lists or lore that they request throughout the game. If they want to go to the library, like I can put that up throughout the week out of game. But in terms of character prep, like leveling, realistically, I know that they're going to have questions when they level, so we level at the table. But with DCC, it's simple enough that it's not going to eat up that much of our time. And so I really have changed what I want to do in person and what I want to do when we're apart. And I know that most people don't want to work their way through a bunch of references to build their character out of group. Especially for them, TTRPGs are fundamentally a social hobby. It doesn't make sense, I think, in their minds to do like D&D homework.
Sure, I can see that. I do think one of the things you said that I think is a very, very good idea is the doing shopping outside of a session. Because there's not much more boring stuff than like seeing one of your players just like haggle with the DM while everyone else just like sits there and just like, waiting for their turn to, if they have to go shopping too. I think that doing that doing that virtually between sessions or whatever is definitely a good idea.
I don't know. My players would spend whole sessions shopping. But
I'm not saying people won't spend whole sessions shopping.
Yeah.
I think it's superior to do it outside of sessions.
Oh yeah. I think it's definitely the more economical way to push the story along. But yeah, this is the most. It's funny because on the one hand, I'm trying to keep the homework to a minimum. On the other hand, this group of players is the most logistical group that I've probably ever had, where they will basically spend entire sessions like trying to work through what are like D&D physics problems. But
such as
how much does a leg of a spider weigh when it's been turned into pure gold?
If it's the size of a dog.
If it's the size of a dog. And then if you chop it off, how many can you carry by yourself versus how many do you need to carry with two people? And then if you put it onto a boat, is it going to sink the boat? Is it going to get it back? What happens to the fangs?
Yeah, all of the like the movement of treasure and the disassembly and then the conversion rates into different currencies and stuff like that has been the source of like an odd amount of fascination.
I think that comes down to what the conversion method is. Like, are you converting every atom of one thing into an atom of gold, or is it a mass conversion?
So that question is more detailed than a lot of people would want to get into, I think is the point.
Yeah.
Like, that sounds crunchy as hell.
And I should say, I say this with love. It was fascinating to watch these sessions go. Something that I thought would be a 5-minute discussion turned into a full session of how do we dismantle and remove this gold thing from this place. It turned out to be. Yeah, I mean, it's no different from when we did Tomb of Annihilation, and it turned out that our group wanted to do two things, and those things were shitty, broken puzzles and moral dilemmas. Right? Those were like, for whatever reason, that's just what tasted best to that group, and so that's sort of what we focused on after that. This group likes these weird logistics problems.
I'm sure it's a reflection of their professions or something.
Maybe.
No.
Which are themselves, to some degree, a reflection of personal taste. I don't know if we wanted to hit anything else in the Table Talk material thread. So, Duncan, you had posted something about the the woman being banned from a flight for a wine incident.
Yeah, we didn't have anything up on the thread this week, so I threw up this article. It's exactly what Shepard just described. The article didn't provide a lot of clarity beyond what the headline says.
As is typical.
It sounded like naturally a white woman. Either because it's more common when white women do it, or because it's not as funny, so you don't make an article about it when it isn't a white woman doing it. I don't know, but I think sounded like a drunk woman got on a plane and maybe kept trying to order wine at like an inappropriate time, or they cut her off or something and she made a scene and they had to land the plane and she was arrested. I do feel like I'm hearing more about people getting like wine drunk or behaving badly, or like wine moms. Is this just me?
Yes.
Like in the past year?
Yeah,
it's
I
totally
have not
just
heard
you.
anything new about it.
Just
but-
me.
I haven't seen an uptick personally, but
Okay.
I don't pay that much
And
attention.
I'm not talking about seeing people in the wild drinking wine. I'm talking about articles and things like that complaining about, it's got some amount of overlap with like Karen complaining. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's missed me, but it did remind me of a couple years ago, me in the wild. I was taking a work trip. Me and a couple other people from my office were basically going to another branch, basically to go, talk to them and look at the way they were doing things and whatever. So, one of my guys, he just had like the worst luck of where he was sitting on the plane. So on the flight out, he was sat between two people who were kind of like this lady that was in this article, where they had like obviously gotten drunk in the airport beforehand, and then it was those two, and then there was some lady who was like further back in the plane who kept getting up to try to sit with them, and then they were all trying to like move seats so they could order two different drinks. And pretend they were like different people ordering them so they could get more drinks. And at one point they started like getting in not the degree of conflict that this woman on this United Airlines flight was in, but they ended up sort of loudly arguing with the flight attendants about whether the flight attendants were allowed to cut them off and stuff like that. And we're all laughing at my buddy who is just sitting right in the middle of it, just trying to sleep, and just absolutely can't. On the flight back, he was sitting next to this kid who probably had an ear infection. 2-3-year-old kid. He's just screaming the whole time.
Amazing.
Yeah, which I mean that happens pretty frequently. It's no one's fault that it happens, but it stinks when it's happening right next to you. And so we were making fun of him for that too, because it was the person right next to him every time.
Well, I'll tell you what. I would happily pay extra for child-free flights.
I think you would have to. Yeah.
Well, of course you would. I mean, it's an additional limitation. But if there was an airline that started running, they're like, hey, you know what? Fuck parents and their kids. No screaming babies on this flight. You gotta pay a little bit extra, but it's adults only. Like, I would definitely consider that.
I feel so bad for the parents on flights when their kid, is not dealing with the pressure change well, or has an ear infection or whatever. I feel so bad for them, because that they are so embarrassed and like mortified that they can't do anything to calm their kid down, or like that's just gotta suck so bad.
Well, there's that, and there's also that a lot of people get mad at the parents, like they blame the parents, and the parents got to deal with that, and you're just
right.
Like, no,
yeah.
don't, like they're not happy about this either. Please just
let them suffer in silence.
Yeah.
Offer them
Shut
your
your kid
condolences, if you are going to offer anything, and then just, understand that it's a tough situation.
Yeah. Or I always love it when like the grandma who's like seen all this shit before is like, let me help you. and like takes care of it, and you're like
Has some like weird
hero.
magic technique that allows her to. Yeah.
Yeah. And then everybody around them like, golf claps, like thank you.
Yeah. But that's pretty rare. There's usually no solving that problem. But the other thing that story reminded me of was there was a story about in Korea there are these like, megacorps, Samsung and everything, that the people who are in charge of them and like their family members are treated like, this sort of aristocracy or royalty in a way, just because their families are so rich and powerful. Because, a few of these companies constitute a majority of Korea's GDP. And so a couple years ago, there was this story about one of the family members of, I forget which corporation it was, but when she was on a Korean air flight, her macadamia nuts got served to her in a bag as opposed to being plated
a
for
porcelain bowl.
Yeah, or whatever. And so
I don't want to cut you off too much, but I do feel like this is important context. She was kicked off of Korean Air. She is the vice president of Korean Air.
Oh, she was of Korean
that's
Air.
even
That's
better.
funny.
According to this article, at least.
Yeah. So it was.
She was. She was and she's also the daughter of the company's CEO.
Sure, which probably has something to do with the reason why she's got the position she's in.
Probably not.
But yeah, probably not. Totally merit based. But yeah, so she got the flight turned around, and this caused a big uproar because it was just an example of the chaebol, just completely ignoring everyone else who's day or perhaps week that this plane incident ruined, because they weren't able to achieve the flight that they intended to say nothing of like the woman or the flight attendant who got just totally reamed and I think fired as a result of this, and that obviously that's not exactly proper termination. So this story is not the same thing, but it was an interesting reminder of that. There's some interesting things about Korean corporations that are worth looking into if that kind of thing interests you.
I should move to Korea. Like if
Step one, you need to have like
not if I'm going to be one of the peasants.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you need to like have a new father.
Right. All right.
Get on that.
Yeah. If you like living in a really, really small apartment, you're pretty minimalist. So if you like really small apartments, yeah, move to Seoul. You won't be able to afford a really small apartment. But
Okay. It's not like China where I can get by just by being white.
No, not in Korea.
Okay. Yeah. Because what are they? I don't remember what the term is, but the white people that just do ads or promote products that get a boost from being promoted by some white person. You know what I'm talking about?
I'm not familiar with
Chinese
this, no.
media.
There's a classic Chinese just racism in Chinese media thing where there's a woman. I think it's a detergent commercial. It's something laundry related, where it's this Chinese woman who has a black boyfriend, and then she shoves him into the washing machine, and he comes out white.
Oh no!
It's really bad. I'll see if I can find it.
I mean, to be fair, that's also hilarious.
Imagine
yes, to us it is. I think other people might disagree.
Imagine the buzz you'd get in the U.S. if you put out that ad.
Oh Jesus, no!
Your brand would go through the roof.
Yeah. Oh, in today's climate,
Man,
sure.
There would be TikToks.
Uh-huh.
They'd talk about it on morning shows.
You'd be the new Bud Light.
Yeah.
People would be taking you out back, taking your Tide Pods or whatever out back,
Right.
and shooting them or whatever.
Oh, okay. So speaking of Tide Pods, do you guys remember? I think this was maybe on the very front end of COVID. You could get these cocktail Tide Pod things.
What?
That you could, it was like a shot worth of, some alcoholic beverage. I don't know if it was just liquor. I think it was some kind of mixed drink or cocktail. And I'm looking this up right now, but I'm pretty sure this existed.
There's a Pennsylvania bar had a Tide Pod challenge shot. Bailey's Irish Cream, vodka with orange food coloring, and a blue liqueur.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So it's not.
So it doesn't
Just
look
like
like
drinks, it looks like a Tide Pod.
It's
Okay.
not. It's not like the Tide Corporation
Ooh,
putting this
okay.
out. This is somebody hopping on the hype, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Which would be. Can you and like? How do you deal with
Ooh,
that
it's
as a
with
company when people
Glenlivet?
start eating
Yeah.
their?
Here we go. Okay.
Oh, this is the
an
Glenlivet
article.
capsules.
This is an article from October
Oh,
2019.
interesting.
Glenlivet. Okay. The capsules themselves are made out of seaweed, so it is a transparent liner. And what are the cocktails that they have? I see 3 different colors here.
I feel like calling this a Tide Pod is. Oh, okay. You know what? The image that came up on the Discord when you posted, I was going to say it's a stretch, but actually looking at the product, it's not a stretch at all. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, part of the whole point of like actually sitting down and like drinking, Glenlivet or Scotch is like sipping on it. I wouldn't want to have a whole like Tide Pod of Scotch just like
Pop in your
What?
mouth.
yeah. Like I'm not a fucking child anymore. I don't need to go and shoot this thing. Come on. I'm sad.
I saw a fun sketch a while back about like a guy pretending to be the Tide CEO doing like a PSA and be like, you gotta stop eating the Tide Pods, kids. Like, come on. And then there's like more products that this company is trying to get him to pitch, and it's other cleaning type things that are very easily mistaken as food, and he's just getting more annoyed as they're provided to him.
Well,
It's pretty good.
recently, maybe 4 months ago, there was all this NyQuil chicken stuff going on. Yes, it
I'm
is.
not familiar with this.
I
No.
mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. It was people talking about cooking chicken in NyQuil. It was some kind of like Zoomer TikTok thing.
What's it supposed to do? Is it
It's-
other than maybe kill you?
I mean, I think it kills you.
Okay, got it.
Here, hold on. NyQuil chicken challenge.
Dangerous TikTok trends aren't going away. Here's how to discuss it with young people you know.
Amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it turns the chicken this very appealing, like blue color. Here.
Yeah, there's no pictures of cooked NyQuil chicken in this article.
Oh. Oh,
Gross.
no.
Oh, is this like a Star Wars recipe? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like a blue milk kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would actually be like super dangerous. If they're boiling it, that's going to concentrate it so much.
Yeah, that's what the article says.
NyQuil is delicious, though, as we know.
But so it's supposed to help you with cold symptoms, rather than just drinking the NyQuil. Like, why do you need to cook it in the chicken? Just take
Well-
NyQuil.
It's a real knockout of a dish.
Wow. Good one. I'm sure that some local news station had a headline just like that.
Speaking of dumb social media stuff, and I understand I'm late to the party on this, but Twitter has I guess, been renamed.
Oh yeah, what's
To,
going on with this?
X.
So, yeah, to
Yeah.
X. This was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I am baffled by this. And I'm sure multiple people have already had much better taste in this, so nothing here is original, I imagine. But like, Twitter was one of the most recognizable brands, both in terms of like, the word Twitter and also the logo. Like, you saw that little blue bird thing, like you knew it was up. And after the company's already failing following the takeover.
To be fair,
And-
it was already failing before the takeover.
Sure,
Yeah.
but it has not. Things have gotten significantly worse. Like, there
Yes.
was an inflection point when Elon Musk took over this company, and now one of the most recognizable names in tech and maybe the world has been just ditched.
Well, consider
Yeah,
this.
it's like if Coca-Cola changed their name to something
Right, so-
Yeah, to, like,
ridiculous.
Plural flarg.
Elon Musk is a genius, and he knows what he's doing. So, what if he's trying to do humanity a service by destroying Twitter?
That's what I had said a while back. It's like, yeah, this is actually
I
a
don't buy
pretty
it.
based move.
What, right, and
in
so
the event
since
that he's
he's
doing
come
it on
in,
purpose.
he's just fucked it up over and over, like seemingly on purpose. What if that's the point?
I I'd like to think that that's true.
I don't buy it.
I don't think it
I don't
is.
buy
I don't because I don't think he's that smart.
Because you can't just shut it down. Someone else will buy it. You have to ruin it. I see what you're up to,
thing that-
Elon. My hat's off to you.
I don't think that's what it is.
The thing that gets me the
Keep
most
up the good
about it
work.
is like I'm not even sure how it works grammatically. Because you can say like I saw a tweet. What are you going to say now? I saw an X.
Yeah.
Like I X'd something earlier today.
I don't know.
It
Well,
just
and-
doesn't.
I didn't understand what was going on. I was like scrolling over to like my apps and I saw this thing that said X and I was like, where's the bird? I didn't even know that it had switched, so I was very confused.
If
Well,
we
Jack, I would
suppose
say-
that he go ahead.
I was like, for your saw a tweet. Well, that didn't make any sense before Twitter was called Twitter. So, the language can still evolve to accommodate this
It
change.
can. It
like
just
did with
feels
Twitter.
more awkward, and so much effort has been put into making "it's a tweet" sound so natural that I don't understand the intent behind ditching it.
It'll be like one of those things that you want it to switch over to it's an X or whatever, but then people will always say, I saw a
People are just
tweet,
gonna keep calling it the tweet.
just like
yeah.
Kleenex and stuff like that.
You mark my
Mhm.
words. This is deliberate. This is the and this is a great way to do it. If you make the language itself hard to employ, people aren't going to do it.
Maybe. I wonder if it's
He's a
one of
genius.
those things, though, where, everyone was like, oh, we're going to leave Twitter when Elon took over, and then, nobody did.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
no,
they
no
had a
matter how
bunch of
bad
people
it gets,
leave.
they'll stay. Apparently,
No,
Right.
there's been a massive user drop in Twitter as far as I'm aware,
Both user drop
and advertisers.
and people working there. So
Okay, well,
Not
yeah,
great.
maybe this is just evidence of me not paying enough attention to Twitter because I've never used it, but...
Elon, if you want to sponsor us, because we know what you're doing and we support you all the way, we back you here.
but none of you use it.
No, but I think that's what he wants.
Oh, okay.
Right, but
You
my,
are
just ahead
my
of the
point
curve.
is, if you want to give me either a late afternoon gaming branded Tesla or rocket ship, or tunnel, I'm there for you, Elon.
Yeah, make it be a Tesla or rocket ship. I don't want a Twitter thing.
He's gonna build us a hyperloop for for late afternoon gaming. All right, I think it's time for us to move on.
That's fair.
All right, what's the next topic?
The next topic is the session.